Alright, welcome back to Chapter 12 of Price Analysis, and in this video we're going to be focused on where we can go to find information about the Brazilian crop. And we're basically going to be looking for reports that are similar to our USDA's WASDE report. That will give us an indication about how planting is going, what acreage is looking like, what expected production is looking like, and if there are any major revisions to any of those numbers, then that's going to be very important in the world market for soybeans especially. And the reason for that is illustrated in that top 5 exporters of soybeans chart, because we see with the US and Brazil being such dominant players in the export market, it's going to matter big time to us in the US what the crop is looking like in Brazil. So it turns out that we can get this kind of report from the national supply company called CONAB, and they're basically the agricultural statistics entity for Brazil. So I'm going to click through here to their website, and it's obviously in Portuguese, but I've found that Google Translate is very, very helpful in this situation. So while you're looking at this website, please have it set up so that Google will translate the page. And as you're navigating around, it will be most convenient if you click this Always Translate box. And then it'll translate every single page that you navigate through. Alright, so since this is just a very, it's not a lot of flowery language, it's just kind of just the facts, I've found that the translation does a lot better than when I'm, say, asking Facebook or Google to translate my friend's Facebook posts from Portuguese or some other language. So that's the good news. We should be able to go and get information from this website. So let's go back and to our book and see where we might get the information from. Alright, so the next thing we have written here is to go and find the calendar of release dates for these reports. And just like in the United States, it's very important to know when these big crop reports come out if you're engaged in commodity markets, because if you don't realize a big report is coming out, you can really get blindsided by some extreme price moves. Same thing is true with these Brazilian reports. So let's go and find the calendar for release dates. I think I've got it linked here. Yes. And just to give you an idea of how to find that calendar, if you ever need to find it on your own, you're going to go here to this menu that's Products and Services, and down here in the Crops menu, they have this Agricultural Calendar item. And if we click that, then we will get this new menu, and I believe this link here is the release dates. No, actually that wasn't correct. So here I am back at the home page for the CONAB website, and if we go back to Products and Services, down to the Crops menu item, and now here at the Safaris Disclosure Schedule, that's going to be giving us a report of when these major reports are going to be released. Okay, so we get this calendar of disclosure, and we can probably figure it out even though we don't speak, most of us, Portuguese. This is probably October, November, December. And this is annual crops 2016, 2017, roughly. But I might be bashful about being able to actually interpret this document correctly. And in that case, it's useful to use Google Translate for this as well. So it turns out that Google Translate can not only help you translate web pages, it can help you translate PDF files or other documents. So if you open up a new tab and go to Google Translate, I'm going to go onto the web page, and you can translate phrases, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but it's going to be more useful for us to translate an entire document. And if you click Translate a Document, you get this menu item where you can choose a file. And then if you just copy and paste the URL of that PDF, and this is the calendar of the crop report's release, literally copy and pasted from that calendar release PDF we were looking at. Copy and paste into this area, click open, and it'll take a minute while it's trying to load in the document to its translating system. But there it is in there, and then you have to go ahead and click translate. And in this case it wasn't that difficult. Let's see if it does any differently if we tell it to translate from Portuguese. I'm not sure actually. We're going to choose Portuguese and translate. Okay, so we got effectively the same translation. I thought it might translate this saffron to crops or something. I think that's roughly what it means. So here for the 2016-17 marketing year, which is what is just ending, the final release was on September of 2017, and now they have scheduled for the next crop year, the one that they're just planting, at least the first 4 of them are scheduled here. They just had their first one on October 10th, 2017. The next one comes November 9th, and the next December 12th and January 11th in turn. Now, the thing to notice about that is roughly the same time as the USDA WASDE reports are released. And it's usually either the same day or 1 or 2 days before. And we saw in class recently that sometimes the US numbers do not move the market, but our US market is responding to world stocks or world production numbers. And oftentimes you can get kind of an advance indicator of that by following the reports coming out of especially Brazil and sometimes other players. So if you think to pay attention to the reports coming out of Brazil, then you can have a heads up on the market. Now if it's really large, then I think it gets absorbed pretty quickly in the US market. But nevertheless, it's important to be aware of these reports' impacts on our market. Alright, so let's take a look at what these reports look like. I'm back here on the home page, and I'm going to go here, Products and Services, back to Crops, and I'm going to click this Harvesting Safra. Okay, now the way this is organized is they have this just table full of historical releases, and you see by this pagination that it goes back quite a bit in time. And there are basically 3 reports that they release. One is called Food, one is for Coffee, and one is for Sugarcane. And food, therefore, is going to include all grains and oilseeds. So, for example, if we're interested in corn, soybeans, and wheat, the information for corn, soybeans, and wheat is found in this food report. And so let's just open up this most recent food report. It's the first report for the 2017-18 marketing year. And here, let's just go ahead and open it up. So again, this is released as a PDF file, and there's actually a lot of text in here if you want to read their interpretation about how the report was compiled, and major findings. And that's going to be pretty difficult for most of us since we don't speak Portuguese. I'm going to go back to Google Translate, copy and paste this link to the report, and ask it to translate the whole report for me. Copy, paste. Again, this will take some time, and I'm going to ask it to translate. So after some time, we've got our document translated, and I'm just going to page down here a little bit. And you can see it's typical of what we would find in a USDA report. Introduction, where they summarize major findings, methodology, area estimated, estimation of productivity, that's yield, production estimates, and other stuff. And we have this table of contents here where we can easily find what we're interested in, which in our case is soybean. And that's going to be listed here. So our soybean reports are going to be found on page 94. So the section on soybeans is here beginning on page 95, and you can see they're talking about expectations about the planted area to increase by 1.6 to 3.8%. And they're also talking about the global market, particularly here they're talking about what's going on in the United States soybean market and soybean prices. And if we scroll down here, they give a regional breakdown about expectations. And you can see that the figures are removed from the translation. If you want to see the figures, you have to scroll back to the original document and take a look. So here's the map of soybean production, and you can see here in this south and central region is the heaviest production of soybean. And as we scroll down here, this is the main table in the report. I'm going to scroll back because for some reason Google Translate removes the column headers, and we at least need to organize ourselves about what these columns mean, and then we can we can probably just look at the table in Portuguese to understand it. So here I've navigated back to the main document in Portuguese, and since we're looking at numbers, we can probably handle it. On the left-hand column, we've got the different regions and states of Brazil, and in the columns, we have basically organized into three parts. The area columns, which is the planted acres. They don't separate out planted and harvested, so this is their estimate of harvested acres. And you can see the units are estimated million hectares. And then these middle sections is productivity, or what we would call yield in our USDA reports. And the yield units are in kilograms per hectare. And then the final section is production, and that's in million tons. So in each of these sections, we see the number from last crop. So 16-17 crop, million hectares is listed here. And so all of Brazil had 33,000 million hectares. And notice here, the convention is where we would place a comma to separate the thousands place, they're placing a decimal, and where we would place a decimal, they're placing a comma. So this number here is 33,909.4 million hectares. Okay, so that was last crop, and then for the area harvested, they give you, and remember, this particular report was released in October, and they're just starting the planting season for soybeans. So they have, they're a little bit uncertain about what their harvested area will come out to be. So they give you a lower bound. You can see that here. It's kind of like a limit inferior and limit superior, which would be lower bound and upper bound if we translate it to English. And so the estimates are that they are pretty certain, if we compare to last year's crop, that area planted will be bigger because the lower bound is 34,000 and the upper bound is 35,000. Over here, in these two columns, they calculate it as a percent change. So this 1.6% is calculated by taking 34.466 divided by 33.909. And that's a 1.6% increase. If the upper bound comes out to be true, that would be a 3.8% increase over the 2016 crop. Similarly for yield, they tell us here what the yield for the 2016 crop was and what their expected yield is for the 2017 crop, and that's for every state and every region. And for the whole, they are projecting 3,075 kilograms per hectare. And that would be a percent decrease of 8.6. So they're expecting quite lower yields than last year. And my understanding is that this year, the fall of 2017, they're experiencing a drought. So the expectation is for a lower crop. Then in this last section, we've got productivity, which just as in our USDA WASDE report, it's going to be area times yield. So they tell you what the production was last year, what their lower bound of expectations are this year for production, and their upper bound for expectations for production. And then they boil it down to a percent change from 2016. So because of the reduced yield, they're expecting a reduction of minus 7.1% to minus 5.1% in production. And this, if you recall what happened in the October 2017 USDA WASDE report, they were reflecting these numbers of the reduction down in the crop, and our markets responded with being up 20 cents on this news in our own USDA WASDE report. because this number here was influencing world projected ending stocks that came out in our own WASDE report.